march of time. Travel fever first shows itself in a recurring tendency by the victim to visit tourist agencies and get in the mood.
Mrs. Smith, you don't know how lucky you are to go to France.
Well, what accommodations would you have for my poodle?
For your poodle? No problem whatsoever.
The next step is the most painful of all. This year, 500,000 Americans will go through this. This year, the American tourist will spend some $300 million in Europe. The currency problem is apt to drive the victim to seek the advice of experts in the field.
I also suggest that you take some traveler's checks with you. These are very well known, and they're readily cashable at all foreign countries.
I'm afraid the different currencies are going to confuse me dreadfully.
Well, just so you will be familiar with foreign money, here's a British £1 note, which has a value of $2.80. This is a 1,000 French franc note, which is worth approximately $3. And this is a 1,000 Italian lira note, which is worth $1.60.
The basic strategy of European travel consists in cramming clothes for a 6 weeks vacation into a weekend bag and keeping the weight within the limit of 44 pounds for the less expensive transatlantic tourist flights and 68 pounds for first-class air travel. More and more tourists are going by air. But most travelers, about 60% of them, still prefer the pleasures of travel on the big ocean liners.
I've come down this morning to say adieu to the Queen Elizabeth. May I say goodbye to you?
Oh, that's fine.
Where are you going?
I'm going to London and Paris I'll spend a week in London and a week in Paris.
2 weeks, is that all?
Yes. Well, you know how it is when you're a working girl. You have to get back home and get to work.
Well, you can crowd an awful lot in 2 weeks, I'm sure. And you know there's a very important question here that I neglected to ask. First of all, your name.
Well, it's Bailey, Pat Bailey.
Where are you from?
I'm from Asheville, North Carolina.
Nothing quite compares with the first departure on the journey to Europe. And never is it quite as exciting the second time. The ringing of gongs, the blowing of whistles, the amazingly efficient movements of the tugs, and, of course, the gaiety of the last-minute farewells. Life on a luxury liner is a little like staying in a big resort hotel. There is a good deal of lolling about in the sun, watching the younger set burning up excess energy at deck sports. For those who want to train for the miles of sightseeing which lie ahead, there is always the gymnasium and the swimming pool. Then, of course, you have to stoke up for the next day's deck games and swimming. And there's nothing like a luxury liner's menu to help the tired traveler keep up his strength. There's something exciting about passing another ship at sea, especially when it's your sister ship, the Queen Mary. Their sailing schedules are staggered, so the two ships generally pass about mid-ocean. After 4 or 5 days of life at sea, the traveler is raring to go. Paris is the magic goal that draws most tourists going abroad. For the first time, I was free to do the things tourists do when they go to Europe. To visit the places they visit and see the things they see. The prospect was a pleasant one right from the start. I could visit the landmarks and the monuments, drink in the majestic beauties of Notre Dame, stroll along the Seine, browse among the books and the stalls. Art Buchwald, columnist of the New York Herald Tribune in Paris, has become so important to restaurants that now he gets tipped. He's the perfect guide.
Lido and the Bel Cabaret. I think I'll take you to some of the smaller spots in town that the tourists don't usually get to.
Good.
On the left bank.
Wonderful.
I think we'll have some fun.
Good.
After an all-night round of left bank cabarets, we made a traditional early morning tour of one of Paris's most colorful sights, its great Central Market. Here in the gray, drizzly dawn, we had spread out before us all the rich harvest of France's fields and orchards, her vineyards and her streams, arranged in a tempting array for the buyers. All the food for the millions of Parisians passes through this market. It is customary for restaurant and hotel managers to come here personally to select food for their customers. Like most tourists, I didn't stay nearly as long as I wanted to. But then, no visit to Paris is ever long enough. Switzerland was next on the itinerary. The country changes rapidly from Lausanne on the banks of Lake Geneva to the rugged, tree-covered foothills of the Alps. There is still some snow. Some of those peaks are snow-covered the year round. What I was hoping to find was snow on the slopes of the Gonnegrad, above the little mountain village of Zermatt. The village itself lies in a sheltered valley, which has become a famous center for winter sports. Less fashionable than St. Moritz, perhaps, doctors and guides. Dominating the skyline above the village is the dramatic peak called the Matterhorn. After a day on the slopes, it is customary to stop at this little tavern, where Gottlieb Perrin and Hans Führer, two Zermatt mountain guides, talked me into a mountain climbing expedition for the next day. They shamed me into it by telling me about an American woman, 72 years old, who just recently climbed to the top of the Matterhorn. A cog railway from Zermatt takes skiers and mountain climbers up Gornergrat, winding through the valleys and over the shoulders of towering mountains. The train passes through the little Alpine stations of Riffelalp and Riffelberg on the way to the Gornergrat. From the windows, one gets occasional glimpses of such peaks as the Weisshorn, the Jungfrau, and the Dame Blanche. No matter how often you read about the majestic grandeur of the Alps, you're still unprepared for the breathtaking sight which greets you as you reach the heart of the Alpine country. Along the route, the mouth of a tunnel makes a perfect frame for the Matterhorn. Up here, the snow is deeper, and the air is noticeably thinner. This is one of the slopes for experts only. The skiers start down as I start up. The guides kept telling me there was nothing to it, that this was an easy climb. But to me, it seemed more like Mount Everest. At least I learned one thing. I found out how amateurs climb mountains. The lead guide pulls on the rope, and the other guy pushes. The amateur in the middle just kind of flounders along. I'm sure the view was magnificent. All I saw was the seat of the lead guide's pants. This was really rough going. The altitude made it very hard to breathe.
How you feel? I feel fine, but I'm a little bit out of condition, I'm afraid. I would just take just a bit of a rest here.
Okay.
How far have we got to go now?
Well, we are now about 12,000.
12,000. We got
About a half hour.
about a half hour. I don't know, but I'll try it. I'll try it.
I think you can do it.
My heart's pumping a little bit at the moment. Well, can I drive once more? Okay.
Good.
Well, here we go again. Heave-o, my lads. It was a pleasure to be leaving the ground. It's wonderful what a change of perspective will do to a mountain. Rome was bright and sunny, as usual at this time of year. Here I really began to run into tourists. Many visiting Europe for the first time, like this young honeymooning couple admiring the Bernini colonnade at St. Peter's. Wherever tourists go in Rome, they find police whose armbands tell the language they speak, and they cover almost all. In Rome, there is another arch, smaller than the Arch of Triumph in Paris, but much older. This was built during the reign of Constantine in the 4th century, and is one of the best preserved of Rome's ancient relics. Wherever you go in Europe, you hear tourists marveling over the fact that they are actually seeing the ancient monuments in which so much of history was written, like the Colosseum, where the early followers of Christ were martyred. How easy it is to visualize amid these ruins the splendor and the cruelty of the great spectacles that took place in this arena. Today, on warm nights in midsummer, opera is sung here in the Colosseum, with oil pots set on the walls giving light, and the broken arena floor boarded over to support seats. From the Colosseum, you can look out over most of ancient Rome. Motor scooters are one of the hazards of life in Italy. They have been enthusiastically adopted by many tourists. This group is a class from Rome's Dante Alighieri University, which has a special department for visitors wishing to take courses in Italian civilization. Some members of the family are just along for the ride. Today, the students are on a field trip for lectures on the part the Forum played in the life of ancient Rome. The relics that lie above the ground are only part of the story. Here, an archaeologist with a crew of workmen is bringing up shards of pottery, dating from civilizations which preceded the Roman Empire. For the weary traveler, sightseeing has a few compensations. Somehow, in this setting, a horse and carriage seemed just the thing. Nothing else in Europe has quite the impact of Venice. It is, at first and last glance, a completely implausible place, and no amount of words or pictures can exactly convey its uniqueness. From the dining terrace on the roof of the Hotel Royal Daniele, once a palace, the view is delightfully different. Here, before the Byzantine splendor of St. Mark's, there are none of the noises of the great city. No horns, no trucks. Around the square are pleasant little cafes and the finest shops of Venice. Along the Grand Canal, 3 young tourists from the Middle West told me how they had solved the money problem.
What are you doing over here?
Touristing.
Just touristing. Having fun?
Oh, loads of fun.
When did you get here?
We landed in England, March 6th.
March 6th. And you're going to stay until October, and you're going to do it on $500.
We hope so.
Is that all your daddy would give you?
Our daddies didn't give us.
He did.
You just know when you first step into a gondola that it can't possibly stay afloat. It seems so top-heavy that it must tip over. But this almost never happens. Besides, unless you're willing to risk getting lost, it's the only way to see Venice. The city's whole life depends on gondolas and on little steamers and motor launches that serve as public buses, making regular stops along the Grand Canal and running out to the islands and the lagoon. All food is delivered by gondola, and there are even stately black gondolas for funerals. It was all a little like something out of a Schubert operetta. Along the narrow canals, one gets a glimpse into buildings that rise sheer from the water's edge. Many of them are slums today, but once they were palaces. Even on the canals, there's a traffic hazard. Well, my trip was almost over, but there was still a short stopover in London. Nothing is very far from any place else in Europe, and air travel has brought its cities even closer together. There was time between planes for a quick trip to some of London's ancient landmarks. It's hard to get lost for long with London's famous beef eaters handy to help out. My last stop was at a famous English pub for a short beer and what turned out to be an even shorter conversation.
I beg your pardon, please. Come on, here now. I beg your pardon, gentlemen. I noticed the insignia of the lapel. Is that any special significance?
What? These?
Yes. What are they?
These are Scottish tartans.
Well, why do you wear a Scottish tartan here today?
Because I'm a Scotsman.
Well, that appeared to be that. From here on, it was just the long, smooth journey home. And in the end, as I thought about it, it was just like all the other trips. Too little time. Too many things to do and see. The same feeling that every tourist has on starting home. The feeling that somehow more might have been crowded in. But it was good to be home again. It almost seemed as though I'd never left.
Thank you.
Hello, Jim. How are you?
Oh, fine, man. Where have you been?
Oh, I've been in Europe.
Oh, that's nice. I'm just going to Europe. See you in 6 weeks.
Wonderful. Have a good time. Time marches on.